inside it grows below the upper line. So, and welcome to another episode of Rebel City Podcast. I don't know when we're going to put this one out. Like, we've got a guest coming in today, but this might be the second time in a row where it's just me and you.
Aye.
Which has been
also
a while.
Got another guest midweek as well, so we'll maybe be picking the pace up a wee bit over the next week or two. You've been in a bit of other things, and obviously I've just been a fucking lazy bastard sitting watching telly and just been generally like lie about. So, aye.
Been an eventful week, but really, isn't it? Like, as far as like news is concerned.
Definitely, man.
Been fucking mental.
Last we were talking about the restrictions. Obviously they've come in and the hospitality industry's been pretty badly hit by another sort of fortnight of closures. There's a lot of places, places like the garage and stuff like that converted into like daytime pubs only for to walk straight into like a 2-week shutdown. So I think there's probably some establishments out there that I probably feel quite bad for in that respect, where they've written, right, how do we adapt? We adapt by opening up a pub during the day, and then when they get their shit together, the government goes, so you're going to wait another 2 weeks.
Can they not still stay open till 6 o'clock, or would they can't sell alcohol?
I think it's any licensed premises is shut down. So you'd imagine somewhere like, for example, the garage would be serving alcohol. You know what I mean? So I've got to assume they're affected. I think even places like the Cat House converted into a pub, although why anybody would necessarily want to go and sit in the Cat House during the day is beyond me. But
I noticed this.
They made the same change.
I walked by the garage last Sunday and I walked by and I was thinking, is the fucking ICW? Because the only time that you ever see anything with a queue or anybody at the door of the garage on a Sunday night, it's ICW. I thought they get a fucking, like a show on and there was bouncers and I was like, what the fuck is going on here? This is weird. I did not know that they had converted to a pub. But
quite a lot of nightclubs have tried it.
Right. Can they stay open till 6 o'clock? And
so that's what I'm saying. I think they'll have been hit by this, just as a number of them around the city had converted into like almost a daytime pub premises. This came in, and because they're licensed, I'm assuming that they must be. Because I think it's only like cafes, so I don't imagine that the garage or the Cat House or any of these other places that have been affected, they'll have just converted to pubs. I don't think they'll have been able to then convert to cafes. And then,
of course,
how many cafes do you need at the end of the day as well for a 2-week period? It's going to be a lot of chopping backwards and forwards to make the changes, if you follow me. So I can't imagine that a lot of them would have been doing that road. You know what I mean? But it's been pretty heavy going for them because, when the lockdown happened, these were the industries that were, biggest affected, alongside musicians and artists and, these kind of people. And as things were starting to open back up, he held out a hope that maybe people could start clawing a bit of money back and start, looking after themselves. And there's another 2-week interruption. So
I find that some of the reaction that I've seen online's been a bit heavy. I mean, we had, I don't even know what night it was. Was it Friday night after they've closed that some of the service industry or the pub industry and nightclub industry got together and went and emptied their ice buckets at Glasgow City Chambers? I get that it's probably mostly symbolic, but I don't understand from an objective point of view why they're putting it onto Glasgow City Council for a global pandemic. Why they think that the measures, the Scottish Government have published every bit of data. I don't know if you had a look at it. They published every bit of data that's led to them to come to this conclusion in a report.
As they should.
Absolutely. I think we were talking about that last week. Well, just going to tell us the reasons why things are coming in so that people can understand it. But even still, people are sort of pushing against it. But I didn't comment on it for a few reasons. One, I don't work in that industry, so what does my fucking opinion matter? But I can see it from both point of view.
It's largely symbolic. It's about, all the drinks they could be making of restrictions. And I suppose we're an SNP council in Glasgow, the symbolism's there alongside, an SNP government. Just my thoughts on that one was I did kind of get it myself, but we're in that situation where I don't know what else we can really do.
Absolutely. I think the weird one about it is that I know this might seem sort of nitpicking or pedantic, but see if you're going to go and do like a protest, at least make sure that everybody distance so that you can be like, well, we didn't put anybody in danger by going and doing or we protest at Glasgow City Chambers. You're like, don't have people fucking rubbing shoulders as they're fucking dumping their ice, for fuck's sake. Like, have a bit of like sense about it. I've seen as well, like one of the many mental health support groups in Glasgow and the wider area, and they posted a photo like Wednesday night, and everybody's like right next to each other, and you're like, for fuck's sake, like, we want to be open. The people that are organising these events, they really need to make sure that everybody follows the guidelines to an absolute T so that we can stay open. I think this is what part of the problem is that when the pubs opened back up, they've not really took the distancing too seriously, and it looks like it's had like an impact on like the numbers. But I think I would just like to see anybody that's wanting to speak out against the restrictions. I get it. Your livelihood's in danger. I understand jobs. Like, I get why you are wanting to kick up a fuss. But see, if you've got to kick up a fuss, at least do it. Keep yourself fucking safe while you do it, and not making yourself an example or like how you shouldn't do it. Do you know what I mean?
Aye. I mean, it's going to be a criticism until there's a vaccine for every type of gathering, isn't it? It's one of them. I think this 2 weeks will be interesting because we have made the assumption, in a general sense, that the pubs opening back up have been a contributing factor. It kind of flies in the face of the fact that heading into winter we know that cases are going to spike regardless. But I think if we still see similar types of spikes whilst the pubs are closed, or in the 2 weeks after that the pubs are closed, then it might to an extent vindicate some of what they're saying. And this is the thing, is like, that's why we said we want to see the thinking on this, we want to see the work on this, because it's new to everybody. And I'm kind of like, some of it does feel a bit slapdash, like some of it does feel a bit like, let's try this, and that's fine, because we are new thing, there is going to be trial and error in some cases, you know what I mean? Like, in terms of like policy, there's going to be mistakes, like we all get that, but like, I don't know, I can get how people look at it and like, well, why does 10 o'clock and 6 o'clock make a difference? Why does pubs make a difference but no restaurants? And all these caveats, and like, definitely needs to be more clarity, and I think more data, and I think this 2 week period will hopefully give us some data to operate on, because if we don't see a dip in the trend, then maybe it is just the fact that we're heading towards winter and it's heading towards flu season, and these types of contagions and viruses and whatever else are likely to spread in those circumstances regardless. So it'll be interesting, to see what the results are.
I think I'm exactly with you. Like, I think that while we're in like uncertainty, and while we're in like we don't know how to actually do this, I'm very interested to see what the results of this, and I think that a lot hinges on the result of this, because if they don't see a positive result in the R number, what they're trying to get to come down, they don't. Obviously, people need to be aware that it'll be in the fortnight after it started, so we'll start to see the results the Friday before the restrictions should be lifted back up. But if they don't, then they don't really have a case to lock anything down again, because if it doesn't go the way, and then that's it. Like, if they try and come out and go, well, we're going to shut the schools again, people will just be like, no, because you have tried it and it didn't fucking work. So, and I agree with you wholeheartedly, where it does feel very much reactionary. It feels like very knee jerk. Like I mean, like you're saying, like, why the pubs? Why is it? Because the alcohol, clearly, and the SNP. I mean, we could look at
assumptions.
And you could look at it very cynically, that the SNP have got a track record of like shitting all over alcohol and and having like minimum alcohol prices and stuff like that. So you can understand why people are like, wait a minute, why is it just this?
And there's a level of form that you can point to that says, well, hold on a minute, there is a trajectory that we're on here that can be indicated. But I don't know. As I say, I think we've made the assumption. I think we've all largely made the assumption, those areas are not involved in the hospitality industry, that the uptick is in some form linked to mere activity in those industries. As I say, I'm happy at the minute to keep an open mind, because the industries that are at risk are like massive contributors to tax and revenue, and it's something that baffles me even more as to why like UK governments have not done more to protect them. You know what I mean? Like, because without the ability to socialise, we've seen Cineworld disappear in the week that Boris Johnson's encouraging people to go to cinemas that no longer exist. The contribution these industries make to the coffers in terms of tax and revenue are astronomical by comparison to some of the industries that have been out of their way to save for no apparent reason. And I think we need to see more clarity on why that's the case. Because a lot of these are, casual jobs, casual work, or low security, like they're the most vulnerable to dropping off the radar in the manner that they have. And if we need the data to tell us, is that the right way to go and attack this industry? Is it property locked in somewhere else? I don't know, man. Yeah. It's one of them where I think we're now at the point where we need to wait and see.
Absolutely. I thought it was strange that the person that the BBC thought was the sort of best person to go and get a reaction for was a guy that owned like a bunch of pubs in Glasgow. Like BBC Scotland had the guy that owns Bucks Bar.
Okay.
It's kind of like you can almost like I predicted how the guy was going to. I wasn't going to watch the video, and I was like, no, do you know what? I've made an assumption that this guy's going to say whatever he's going to say, and they pretty much said exactly what I thought. And see the campaign that's going to run. It just seems like for all angles you're just getting it. Like the campaign that's going to run for people to write in their chalkboards, tell Nicola that 37 jobs here, and I get it, I totally get it, but it all just kind of feels like we're starting to like really turn on each other now. Like the first lockdown, it was we need to come together, we need to get through this, we'll get through this together. Now it's just like, nah, fuck this. And the amount of people that just aren't following the rules or the rules, but the recommendations. Like I went and met an ex-work colleague yesterday in Costa Coffee in Royal Exchange Square, and people were just like walking up and down the queue. Where's the toilet? And you're like, mate, for fuck's sake. Like there's a queue of people there, masked up, 2 meters apart from each other, and you've just stoated in like a fucking toddler and walked down the queue and tapping people on the shoulder, here, mate, where's the toilet? And it's just like, fuck off. Like, get the fuck away from me. And this is where there's definitely a group of people that are just going to just no bother their arse. Just don't give a fuck. No matter what happens, even if like 90% is follow the rules, I think there'd still be like this 10% that just don't care. Don't give a fuck, and they'll just go about their day the way that we're going to go about their day anyway. I don't know, for whatever reason. I would hope that it's because they've got so much going on in their life that they just can't even let that. They don't have the brain capacity to really think about like keeping distance with people and wearing masks and stuff. But I mean, like looking at the people, it just looked like people just couldn't care less about it, which is a shame.
It is, man. I've not much in the way of experience of that. Let's say this week I've been keeping an eye on the Wayne who's been asked to self-isolate after close contact with, a positive case in our school, and obviously no being at work. My out and about time has plummeted recently because, again, restrictions and various other aspects and stuff like that. So I get that people are starting to get touchy, but it's something that I'm a kind of outsider on at the minute, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm. How are you finding just having to spend, the majority of your time locked up in this?
I mean, as I say, one of the reasons we've been covering books recently is because I've been reading books. So I've been taking up a lot of time with that. Like, we've obviously batted a few ideas about for stuff as well. I've kept up with the gaming, quite enjoying that. Started that Red Dead Redemption 2, which is just huge. So, I mean, that'll take up huge amounts of time. But then been spending time with the Wayne as well. Obviously, with her being off, because thankfully she's not shown any symptoms. We're about day 10-ish or so of the isolation, so it's looking all right, you know what I mean, so far. But I've been trying to get her into watching some movies with us, because I've spent my week split between being a cowboy and Red Dead and like watching like a whole load of kung fu movies at night. I went through the Ip Man series. I don't know why, but I think subconsciously my brain was after that kind of like westerny sort of vibe that a lot of the kung fu movies take up, you know what I mean? Like, so I tried to get her to watch Kill Bill with me, because I thought that's a good like East meets West kind of like thing going on. Female character is the lead, a lot of women in it, like, grown up movie. She's 16 now, so I was thinking to myself, let's watch some grown-up movies. You know what I mean? Like, I ended up start watching The Parent Trap because I got outvoted and we ended up on Disney Plus.
What one?
So that one's not been gone well. The Lindsay Lohan.
Oh, the Lindsay Lohan one.
It was terrible. It was terrible. But aye.
Who is it? Is it Jamie Lee Curtis? It's the mall. And no, that's Freaky Friday. I clearly don't know my Disney movies, but
it's Red. She was Liam Neeson's wife. Was the mother? She obviously passed away in the
Natasha
Redbridge.
That's it. Aye. So Parent Trap's the one about the twins. Lindsay Lohan plays the two twins. Right. Okay. Yeah.
And you know, see for Disney, like it is an absolutely like it sends out some pretty fucking shocking messages about parenting. To be honest with you, because realistically, what they do is they have twins. They get divorced. They take a twin each. One fucks off back to England and one stays in America. And they don't know each other. So this dad just basically packed up one of his daughters, fired her on a plane, and then forgets about her for 11 years. And then the mother on the other side does the same. And then they get back together because it is a Disney movie. But there's like no mention of like, it's pure, oh dad, it's lovely to meet you. You'd have been like pure cunt. Where have you been for 11 years? Like pure,
exactly.
Like, I get that to stay with my ma, but like, you exist. Like, what is that? You know what I mean? Like, so that gets glossed over pretty spectacularly, and the way does not appreciate me pointing that one out either.
There's an extended edition where you get to see them go to like therapy and shit because they're so traumatized with what happened to them when they were babies. Do you know what I mean? But do you know what? Like, before we talk about like the East meets West, because I'm quite interested in that. I won't go into it before. There's some very, very poor examples about how to be a human being in movies and TV that I think that I was watching something the other day that or I was listening to something the other day that was talking about like how bad an example for living, like the 90s sitcoms like Sex and the City, Friends, like the examples that these TV shows give you, like Joey Tribbiani's like a total rapist. Like that guy would be cancelled so badly nowadays. It's like unbelievable. You can imagine him being like a dirty old man, or one of the old guys that's like, all right, darling, and just like grabs a woman by the hips as he like moves past her. Like, there's no need for you to be touching her. He's just like, I'm just a nice old man, no threat to him. It's like, you're a fucking sexual deviant. That's what you are.
That Monica character.
Even like Monica's like OCD, and they all just pander to her, and it's just like
Ross is a crackpot. I think I've seen somebody tweet something along this kind of lines about Ross is an actual like, you know, controlling psychopath, and you're like, there is elements if you look at it, he probably is, but this is how we learn in like sort of modern. This is how we've learned in modern culture. Is like pure right. I've had times in my life when I've been a lot younger where I've actually thought about like something's happened to me, and I've actually thought about like how somebody reacted to this certain situation, and then when I think about the example that's coming to mind, it's like that's for a TV program, and how rooted in reality is that reaction to stuff? It's not at all. But I think like that's something that we do, is that we base a lot of shit and how we react and how we deal with people. Like, I can't remember what one where they just cut them out. They just cut people out of their life, and this is kind of like, that's what you do. People sitting watching TV programs and going, that's what you do when somebody crosses you. You cut them the fuck out of your life. You're like, is that how a healthy human being operates? I don't think it is. I think like we're thankfully we're starting to move past that, but I think it's just a bit of a strange one, that. But the East meets West stuff, you'd say they're like a lot of the kung fu movies like borrow. Do you think that they borrow for the cowboy movies, or do the cowboy movies borrow for the kung fu movies? Is it like chicken and egg thing coming up here? I think it's probably a bit of one and the other. What was the one? I think they mentioned it in Kill Bill, was it Seven Samurai or something like that, which is like the Magnificent Seven. So whatever one of the two of them came first will be where it started in popular sort of modern culture. But I think it goes back further than that. You know what I mean? Like when you look at, you know, codes of honor and, you know, basically like, you know, duels, like gunslingers versus like, you know, karate fights and stuff like that. Like there's a lot of like similarities. So as I've been playing Red Dead through the day, you know, a couple of hours a day and just sort of plugging away with it, at night time once, you know, Wayne's away to bed and, you know, sitting chilling out, I've been going through the kung fu movies, and I come across that Ip Man, and that's kind of where it first like twigged back with me was like that these guys were essentially like Eastern gunslingers, like in the kind of traditional like cowboy movies where somebody rocks up at their door and they're like, "I hear you're the best, like outside, let's settle this." And they would go away and have these spectacular duels, whereas obviously in the West it's just mud and blood. But the same things happening, even two different ends of the world. So I've been enjoying that quite a lot recently.
What's interesting is that I love that Man series. Like, I think they're brilliant, and I know the
story's incredible, man. Like I'd seen them about for a while and always meant to watch them, but like, and again, I don't know how true to his real life the movies that I've watched are. I did do a wee bit of reading on them because I was like, how much of this is true? And like the broad strokes, it seemed fair. But the life of the guy is spectacular, man. Like just for
I think obviously like just balancing on one foot and like kicking 40 guys while like balanced on like a tipped over chair or whatever. Like obviously it's exaggerated, but like you said, the broad strokes are like where the guy came from. I think like a lot of the actual battles that you see where he had to fight against like Chinese, Japanese. He was Japanese? No, it was all the way about. He's Chinese, and it was the Japanese were invading China.
Just ahead of sort of World War II, and he has to essentially defend Chinese honour as the Japanese general, just as he's a Japanese martial artist and he's decimating all the local masters, and in the end, obviously, he steps up to like be this symbolic Chinese hero against Japanese invaders. But he taught Bruce Lee. He's one of Bruce Lee's masters. Some of the ways that was covered through it was quite comical. When Bruce Lee's coming to his door as a Wayne and he's like turning him away and stuff like that. And again, might have happened, but just the way they handled that in the movie series was quite funny. So the guy's like impact on like several forms of martial arts, like movies, like Bruce Lee, like all sorts, is just absolutely massive. So it was good to get into that one, man.
Absolutely. I think the differences even in the culture when you talk about like the East versus West, where they really borrow from each other as far as like sort of overarching narrative, like you're saying, like honor and like the way that they had the sort of ideas, but I don't really remember there being very many like wanted for rewards. Like Ip Man's supposed to be the greater good, which is like a difference in the Eastern and Western culture that we see even like right now, where like if we go back to what we're talking about in like COVID, where they think that in Asia or in Japan particularly it hasn't been as impactful because they wear masks. They're used to just, and the reason that they wear masks is because they don't want to spread colds and flus amongst each other. So they've got maybe a sort of greater good ideology and sort of mindset when they think about like how they impact society, whereas we are more the guy puts the sheriff's badge on because there's like a bounty on somebody's
aye.
Do you know what I mean?
That's very, very anti-hero. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of what I'm aiming for in my Red Dead character. So it is like after Westworld, I'm going for the anti-hero. I'm not necessarily being a bad guy, but if I get into gunfights, people are getting fucked up. You know what I mean? But again, that's something that's probably quite prevalent in some of that Eastern stuff as well. You know what I mean? I do think in terms of their narratives, in terms of how they have told their stories historically, like there's a lot of really interesting similarities, considering there really probably shouldn't be as much in the way of like cultural crossover, considering the geography and the time of the two places. You know what I mean? Like, so are those ideas then just like intrinsic human qualities rather than manifestations of any one particular culture? Who knows?
Aye, it's an interesting take on it. When I watched I don't know if it was Ip Man, I think it was maybe the first one, where like you're saying, the guy turns up and they turn up at the village and they're like, we're the such and such for such and such village, and I thought about like the schemes. I wasn't thinking more about the Wild West. I was thinking more about first day at school, where it was like, who's the best fighter in your school? Him and him. Right, there's 4 here. We need to sort this out. Who's the top man? And then like getting into somebody else's scheming, being like, who's your top man? Here's your top man. Like get them to fight with each other, which I thought was funny.
Definitely.
That like you're saying is maybe something that's just like in our genetic code as human beings, just to be like that. Who knows?
If we're drawing comparisons between pre-war China and like post-Thatcher schemes in Glasgow, then it might be a wider thing for us all.
Post stature. My week, like you're saying, I've been doing other things. Like I've been get made redundant not so long ago, and been doing things like podcast production, counselling, been doing CBT with people, which is very rewarding. But whether or not I include this in our podcast, I don't know. But I think I want to get it off my chest anyway. Some of the reaction that Kenny Flip the Mindset's been getting on YouTube has been out fucking rageous. I mean, he's been getting called. I mean, this is a guy that attracted me to produce. The reason I approached him, he put on Instagram that he wanted to start a podcast, and what attracted me was that the guys out there trying to put out like a positive message into the world.
Absolutely.
Suffered poor mental health due to the death of his brother. Grew up without a dad, so I think his big brother's been a father figure for him. So it's hit him harder than it hit most people, and he's recovered. He's recovered to the point where he can function and he can like live a healthy life. Is the guy like fully recovered? No, he suffers from anxiety. I've witnessed that firsthand. I've got a lot of admiration for the guy about how he deals with his anxiety. Especially when he's sitting down with people like Barry Ferguson, who's his hero, to interview him about his football career. And the guy's like 5 episodes into a podcast.
Yeah.
He's approaching about 250,000 across all platforms. He's been in the top 200 iTunes, Apple podcast chart for the second that he launched the episode with Chris Bungard, and he's done incredibly well. I'm so proud of the guy for how he's handled it. But
absolutely,
the comments that have been coming in on YouTube, and I don't know where it stemmed from. I've got a feeling that it stemmed from Cy Ferry's. Cy Ferry was episode 3, and I think he's attracted quite a lot of the open goal sort of football laddie type of come in. And honestly, dude, like, I mean, there's people in there like, tell that baldy bastard to shut the fuck up and let his guest talk, and you're like, what the fuck is going on here? Like, I don't know where it's came from, but it is like every single one of them's a guy. Every one of them's like, oh, they're a football fan, and it just made me be like, pure, like, what the fuck is going on? Like, in this sort of like wee microcosm of society, and like the sort of football, like male-centric football fan world, where people think that a guy that's wanting to come out and talk about his anxiety and talk about how he happened to find himself where he was in his life, and date across with people that are like his massive fans, that they think that that's like a sort of a dog whistle for them to just start abusing people. It's just been so strange to watch. Quite disheartening to watch as well, dude. Like,
we've faced it at times, as I'm sure almost really anybody that puts themselves out there in the public domain now will. But having obviously met and, you know, been sort of peripherally involved, nowhere near to obviously the extent that you have, just because, you know, doesn't need 2 people to produce what you're doing. So I'm quite taken by how Kenny's reacted to it, and it's reminiscent of how I think in certain respects we handle ourselves, or at least how we seek to handle ourselves. And I think that's probably another one of the reasons why, like yourself, being drawn to somebody like Kenny is actually entirely valid, because like he's just pushed straight back against it, and like I've got a lot of respect for that. So because he went into the comments and he tried to address them, he tried to engage with people, and like when it became clear that there's some comments that, you know, he was never going to turn around, he's obviously moved on, which is entirely the right thing to do. But I think meeting it, addressing it, and then actually saying to people, well, hold on, this is my podcast, like, I'll do it however the fuck I like, well, is something that I can definitely relate to, because, you know, how many conversations have we had the other 2 and a bit years we've been doing it, where we wonder about direction, we wonder about, you know, guests and, you know, topics and all these other things that we touch on, and just went, you know, what we thought was best rather than what we thought might have been more popular or more accessible or whatever it is. Like, we made our podcast for us, and other people thankfully have got on board with it. And I see that in Kenny, and I think when, you know, having met him myself, he's a genuinely lovely guy. And I again have witnessed how he, you know, confronts his anxiety head on as well, and been really impressed by what I've seen from him in that regard. I think he's got a lot to say, and like, of the other 250,000 people that have engaged with him, you know, I think they're the ones that we should be listening to, rather than the negative voices that see somebody out there trying to do something for themselves and, want to try and pull it down.
Aye, absolutely, man. That's why I wanted to talk about it. I suppose, like, you've got that, like, you're obviously one of my soundboards, and I get a wee bit sort of frustrated. My advice to Kenny was just don't feed it. Like, the more, like you said, it became very apparent that no matter what the guy said, even though he's like, I'm trying to have a conversation, I'm trying to do something a wee bit different with this podcast versus some of the other popular podcasts in Scotland that are interview based, and I'm trying to have a conversation. People just did not take to that. I was like, just leave it. The people that will come back are the people that you're wanting to engage with. The people that are coming in and taking a dump on your YouTube video, and then it was even just hearing you say that and be like, he's handled himself really well for your perspective, and that's been good for me just to hear that. So I just wanted to sort of kind of get that off my chest. The other thing, I mean, suppose we're kind of doing this back to front to what we usually do. We usually talk about what we've been up to through the week at the end of the podcast, but I don't know if you've watched American Murder.
I did. It's true crime. It was one of the ones where it's true crime. I've got
no my time. Fucking God. Aye, absolutely. But I think I got about halfway. I mean, if anybody's listening to this, and spoiler alert, turn off the podcast right now if you don't want to know what happens, because I want to talk about what the fuck goes on. I got halfway through this documentary and was like, see if I think is about to happen let me put that in decent English. If what's about to happen is what I think is about to happen, I don't believe it. I can't believe it. Like, is this guy like murdered his wife in Wayne's? And me and Sharon were sitting speaking about it, and I was saying to her, like, the only way that I can actually think about this in any sort of rational way is to think that this guy's had some sort of like psychotic episode. Like, I can't, like, the explanation that the police and the judge say, you're just a selfish man that found a new girlfriend and wanted his new life, and so decided that the best way to go about it was to just wipe his old life off the face of the planet. I cannot get that through my mind. Like, the way that he describes him killing his own kids, with one of them saying, like, please stop that. I was like, this guy must have had a psychotic episode. That's my only explanation to this. This guy's broke somehow inside, and that's how he's done what he's done, because see, otherwise, man, like, I can't think how a human being could do that today. I mean, I don't usually cry when I'm watching TV programs. I'm quite stoic in that sense, even though I do feel quite emotional, but I was bawling my eyes out at the end of it when they were showing you the pictures and the video, like the home video with the kids, man. I was like, wow, man, how the fuck did this guy do this?
It's really horrific. I mean, I think his actions did spawn a new sort of terminology within psychology for a family annihilator or something like that, which has become an area of study, as other examples like the wrestler fella who was Chris Benoit was another one who was a family annihilator. So there are other examples of it, but I think this guy was the first one that they've tried to look at. Certainly the new younger girlfriend was a factor, but I don't ever get why anybody who is unhappy in a relationship, even if there's kids involved, I mean, maybe 100 years ago when like divorce and like single mothers and all that were like societally kind of like taboo and people were, ostracized for their communities as a result of them, I would get why somebody somewhere in an adult mind might go there. But like in the modern world where whole marriages end in divorce and there's, nuclear families all over the place, including mine, like where kids are from other relationships and are still family, like I don't see any legitimate basis for it other than like sickness, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
Or at least a form of sickness. Like, I definitely think, the guy's behaviour has played a huge part in it. We're not trying to excuse him in any way, but
no, not at all. That was more like, it wasn't like a thing for me to try and excuse the guy for what he did. It was just more like a way for me to be like, I actually can't get myself into any kind of headspace to think about why somebody would do that isn't like psychotic, that doesn't just break. What I did find funny was at the very start of the documentary, and I went back and listened to it, because I was like, this is interesting. This is a very interesting point for me, being a mental health professional, is that the bit where she tells his wife that he murdered in the end, tells him that his kid's only going anywhere near his mum and dad, and he just kind of, he doesn't accept it, but he's like, almost, you can hear the fear in his voice. He's like, I'll sort it, I'll sort it, I'll sort it. And then I did, up to a point, start to think, I wonder how she's treated him. I wonder like how that relationships went. She's been very controlling about it. And then I was just like, no. Like, do not think in it. There is nothing that drives somebody to like kill their wife and kids. There's no bullying. There's no controlling. There's just leave. I watched a YouTube video after it that was like what they don't tell you in the documentary, because obviously Netflix, they've only got a certain amount of time. And
there's also going to be a level of bias in any documentary.
Yes,
you know what I mean?
It turned out that the guy had an affair with a guy like 4 years previous. He was like closeted bisexual.
Okay.
He'd had multiple affairs that they didn't touch in the documentary, and the girl that he had the final affair. I know that this is conclusive in any shape or form, but the girl that there's a bit where the police are like, what do you think? She's like, I don't know anything about the blood. And it turned out like her internet history, she'd been like going on his wife's Facebook daily for like 2 years and stuff like that. So there's a lot more to the story that might be able to explain somewhat. I don't know if there is anything that can explain it, but
or at least provide like mitigating circumstances.
Give you an insight into how an adult that's got two beautiful wains could fucking smother them. I just don't. Unbelievable. But that one was even more shocking to me than the Rodriguez guy, the American football player. And I think for like guys like Chris Benoit, where the science that we look into like brain injury and like that, wrestlers just take bump after bump after bump, and you could maybe look to the steroids combined with the head trauma, combined with whatever was going on in that guy's life. I don't know, might have pushed them, because that was like murder-suicide. So he definitely broke. He definitely had a psychotic episode, but this dude seems to have cold-blooded killed his wife and kids and then tried to like just be like, I don't know what's happened here.
I thought it was quite weird to start with, where his wife's friend and her husband are at the house where the police trying to get in, and he shows up as if like, oh guys, in you come, have a look round. And the wife's pal is like, oh, here's her phone, here's her keys, and blah blah blah. And like the partner's boyfriend or husband is in the back, and he's looking at the police officer, and he turns to me and goes, like, he's not right. He's not behaving the way he normally behaves. And the cop catches it on his shirt cam or his vest cam or whatever it is, and you're like, it took that guy like 45 seconds of being in that house to be like, pure, this cunt is fucking dodgy. And I'm like, well, that guy's instincts were absolutely bang on, but I don't know how anybody could have predicted what was going to come. And again, I'm with you in that sense, where like, if you're not happy in a place, just leave. Like, get your divorce. Like, look out for your wains. Like, make yourself available to them as best you can. Like, work it out. You know what I mean? Like, be a grown up. You know what I mean?
I was doing mad. Like I said before, I actually like had a wee check in and went, what are you doing here? I was doing like mad mental gymnastics. I was like, I wonder if like, because she was saying that he didn't want to go near her sexually, and then when he told the story, it was like, we had sex that night, and I was thinking, wonder if she's been controlling. So I wonder if she forced him to have sex with her, and that's been it. And then I was just like, nah, man, get up. Like, there's no explanation. This just get up, man. Stop trying to think about it.
The tone of the documentary did leave, at least until fairly late on, the notion that there could be like a twist and something revealed about her that would indicate something. But no. Once you see the whole picture, you're like, this guy just was a scumbag who went off the deep end, and his family paid the price for it.
Absolutely, man. Shocking stuff. But this is what I mean. Netflix seems to have just went, we're a true crime channel, stand-up comedy channel. They know what they're hitting. Do you know what I mean? They know, like, obviously, and the analytics and analysis that they do, they know what they're doing, and they're smashing out the park, man. I mean, they must be dying for stand-up comedy to get back. So they can get some new stand-up.
As well, like, I'm obviously, addicted to the true crime side of it, but I think I needed to check myself during the week, because I found myself watching some mad thing about, like, an assassination during German reunification, and I was like an episode and a half in before I had to go, what am I doing here? Like, I don't have any interest in this.
Is that what it was called? The Perfect Crime?
So I just went, true crime, and just like pure fired on him is like 90 minutes in, where I was like, hold on a minute. This is like half in German, and I'm not even remotely interested. I just like muscle memory went, Netflix and true crime, let's go. You know what I mean? Like, but I know 80s German reunification was not my bag.
I seen it pop up and I watched the trailer and was like, nah, I'm all right.
I just knee-jerked it.
So, well, I mean, we're about halfway, so we may as well move on to like the news and politics and stuff like we usually do. Where do you want to start with this week? It's been fucking... Every week we come in going, it's been mental.
It's been another quiet week.
We start with Trump's COVID.
I think so. I think that's probably like the biggest and probably like least surprising news story of the entire year is that Trump caught COVID. Seems to have been at the rushed announcement for Trump's third Supreme Court nominee after the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She'd obviously on her deathbed asked that her seat not be filled until after the election, and the Republicans, who have been on a 40-year crusade to take a Conservative majority into the Supreme Court, after they stopped laughing, told her to go fuck herself.
Really?
Well, not literally, but in terms of what they actually went out and did immediately after she was dead, yeah, they pretty much told her to go fuck herself.
Was she a Republican?
She was a liberal
Republican.
Justice, like Democrat.
Oh, she a Democrat? Right, okay.
Aye, well, it's more about their ideology than their party, but aye.
Right.
So it's a lifetime appointee, which means, obviously Ruth, or RBG as people were referring to her as, it's just easier, was hoping to hold out after the election. I think she was in her 80s. I think it kind of like flags up one of the big, massive flaws of like the American system, particularly like when it comes to their constitution. These positions are lifetime appointments, and these roles were written at a time when people living to 45 were like old-timers. Like, people were not meant... These roles were not written for people to live in office until 90 years old.
Yeah.
So I think we need to look at it. It's the same as like the right to bear arms. I mean, that right to bear arms rule or, amendment or whatever to the Constitution was written at a time when you had a fucking one-shot musket that it took 15 minutes to load. You know what I mean? Like, it was not for an AR-15 a rocket launcher.
Oh, 100%, man. Like that. There's somebody that's done a joke somewhere down the line where it's like they wrote this shit with a feather. Why the fuck are we still like living our lives towards it? Like, aye. I mean,
so amongst the always sunny joke with all pure, the government today has got no right to tell us how to live our lives because the government of 200 years ago already did it. You're just like, that is literally what's actually happening there. But aye, so Trump has now got his third nominee. If he can get it in through before the election, which he absolutely will, because it's essentially the Republicans' wet dream for the last 4 decades, then they'll have a Conservative majority on the Supreme Court, which means things like abortion, gay rights, and such are all on the table, particularly if the Orange Führer, gets re-elected.
Trumpistan.
Oh my God. He is literally sliding by the closer and closer into fascism. I mean, we've heard reports of forced hysterectomies, fucking detention, or let's call them what they are, concentration camps, basically. He's now filled the judiciary across the country, packed with Republicans, including the Supreme Court, which means whether he's in office or no, Republicans can now probably legislate for the next 50 years, and there's no an awful lot anybody can really do about it. Like, he's undermining postal votes, he's out there catching COVID, spreading it across to almost everybody in the White House, press secretaries, vice presidents. I mean, they're dropping like flies out there. The whole week out there has just been like absolute chaos.
Man.
It is literal just an actual like smouldering trash fire of a country at the minute. So it is because I don't see any real hope for like major change. Like, Biden's main policy is, I'm no Trump, and when we get into office, let's find a way to work with Republicans. This is the alternative we've got to Trump. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So even if he loses, there's a big argument for saying it's probably already too late.
Aye, I think we we rejected as a society. So obviously, I'm not talking about me and you, but we've rejected change. All other shop, like it's just been we rejected Corbyn, and he was painted as a terrorist and a communist, which he wasn't. To think that Biden is anything that resembles a socialist is absolutely batshit crazy to me.
Aye.
Like, for fuck's sake. And that's where I find it, like, if I think about it too much, I try not to think about it too often, because it is quite a wee bit distressing, is that we find things that seem common sense to be radical, and we can't decipher.
We allow it to be painted as such. Definitely.
We don't know our arsehole for our elbow when it comes to stuff like. So, I'm with you, man. Like I've disconnected a lot for the American politics thing, and I don't want Trump to win again, but also in that same breath, I'm not really that enthusiastic about the prospect of Biden and Kamala Harris.
Aye.
Like you're saying, there's going to be no actual change that happens. It's just going to be a Democrat, and people might feel a bit better about things. People might...
Maybe we'll put some of the trash fire out, you know what I mean? But the systematic change that's required across America, across every sort of...
Western world.
I mean, I think we're at a societal tipping point where, you know, we are really dangerously close to the moment where it goes one way or another indefinitely, you know what I mean? But with everything that's going on now, you know what I mean? Good luck solving anything else, you know what I mean?
Yeah, they're definitely winding up to undermine the postal vote, though. I mean, you can hear it every time one of them gets in front of the camera. It's open for voter fraud. Pence was saying it in his debate with Kamala Harris during the week as well, where it was like this, you know, postal votes. What I find really distressing is that they're not fucking challenging them on it. Nobody's going like, where is your evidence? Show us the receipts. Where is the evidence that postal votes have ever been open for ballot fraud? It's just unsubstantiated, and it's kind of like the last time. They're just going out and they're just saying stuff. They're just saying things to build their agenda towards whatever it is that they're going to mean. Do you think he'll just refuse to concede?
So, I mean, it's a possibility. What's a bigger possibility, especially if he nominates a Supreme Court justice before the election, is that, so the leading thought process is that this, 10 minutes after the polls close nationwide, Trump's basically just going to declare victory and then leave it for the court system to decide, knowing that the Republicans during his term have packed every lower court and upper court for Republicans. So this is like where I was talking earlier about like fascism actually coming in, is that Trump is now manoeuvring the actual levels of power in a manner which could potentially allow him legally to contest the result of the election into like January, February time. You know what I mean? So all sorts are legitimately potentially going to kick off. The notion that he's going to take all these steps and then no utilise them. I mean, they're ultimately Republican strategies that Trump has just been the face of. Like, these things were all happening given the control of go to the Senate and all these places anyway. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, this is not about Trump. Trump just happens to be there while this is also happening. But the fact that he's standing next to this political apparatus that could be used to delegitimise an election is extremely worrying. And the fact that he's been non-committal about whether or not he accepts election defeat and stuff like that. They've put a lot of pressure in the last week or two on results being counted and announced in day, but because the election is so, at risk, and there's pandemics and early voting and late voting, and different states have got different rules about when votes can be counted and all these things. Like, it's physically impossible for all the votes to have been counted in day. So usually what you usually get is a projection, and then based on that projection, one candidate and another concedes based just to keep like their face on the news and stuff like that. It's all very like stage managed and whatever else. But usually the result was accurate. You know what I mean? Whereas this time they think that Trump is going to use the changes to like the Supreme Court and stuff like that to essentially hijack that process and just announce victory. Kind of similar to like George Bush and Al Gore when Fox News came out and announced that Bush had won, even though Al Gore had technically won at that point. It then went to the courts and was obviously, declared in favour of George Bush, and we know what happened after that. So it's basically a kind of similar tactic where within a couple of hours of the polls closing, you should probably expect to see Trump announce victory, and if it does, then we are like through the looking glass into like really fucking dangerous territory.
And who knows how that ends earlier? It could be civil war.
Yep.
And then power vacuum, and who knows? Well, who's going to say? Who knows who's going to step into it? Well, we know who's going to step into the power vacuum. It's going to be China and Russia, and then
we're already there.
We're already well, whatever's left, whatever is left of it, but then we're in suspect territory when it comes to that. I mean, I think
the debates were pretty funny. Like, if we can call them that. I mean, I didn't really watch them because I knew the presidential debate was going to be just two old guys shouting at each other, which, I can get down the road. And the highlight of the vice presidential debate was a fly lander on some cunt's head. And then you're like, tells you probably all you really need to know about the debate, that the two things we took away from the vice presidential debate is that Kamala Harris threw a bit of sass at Pence for interrupting, and a fly landed on his head. So I don't bother watching any of the rest of them because that's as good as it gets.
I'd be interested to see what the figures were like for people that actually viewed it. They're probably shockingly low. Don't think people actually give much of a fuck. I think people know who they're voting for already. Do you know what I mean? It's
mere a tradition. I think in the UK when they came in, I vaguely remember them being quite well engaged with to start with, but because maybe as a result of having so many general elections in such a short period of time, people quickly became pretty bored of them. You know what I mean? To the point where even in the last set of debates in the UK, like the Prime Minister or the current Prime Minister never even bothered his arse to show up to them. You know what I mean?
Aye. The ones that I watched on BBC, I think I watched the ones when it was Cameron and Corbyn. And they just, I mean, you were like, Corbyn's making some good ground here. He's making some, and it just cut to the crowd and some fucking Tory plants then just screaming back at him about his views on Gaza or the IRA or whatever, just the usual, just bullshit, just perpetuating the propaganda. So I've the last time, like you're saying, people didn't even turn up. I just didn't even bother my fucking arse. But I suppose as we tend today, and I think a lot of people tend today, and Scotland and the UK in general, we look at America and we think oh man, it's a bit of a shit show over there. But we've had a bit of a political shit show here, as far as politicians basically just wanting their own set of rules when it comes to restrictions. And I think this is what we've spoke a lot on this about, how the political class actually feed quite a lot of the discontent, and they seem unaware of how their actions can be viewed. And usually at this point, when there's a scandal like this, the person would do the right thing and just kind of leave. But I don't know. I don't really know what's happening as far as I don't even know her name. That's
so. I think you're talking about Margaret Ferrier. So an SNP MP who showed COVID symptoms, got a test, jumped on a train to London, spoke at the House of Commons, received the results of her test as positive, and then jumped on a train back up the road to, obviously exposing potentially, hundreds of people throughout the process. So she got a lot of stick for that. First Minister and the Speaker of the House, and Angus Robertson, both told her to get herself to fuck, resign. The party whip was withdrawn, meaning that she no longer represents the SNP,
right?
And she's now basically an independent MP at the minute. And according to the press today, she's now come out in the Sun of all places and told everybody that she has no intention of resigning. I mean, you couldn't draw a more clear correlation between this type of behaviour and that of Dominic Cummings. I think when you look at the early resignation of the Scottish CMO as a result of breaching, the restrictions and the rules surrounding lockdown, that was a no-brainer that person had to go. It's slightly different because you can't sack an MP to a certain extent.
Mm-hmm.
But the blatant refusal to just even do the right thing. People are looking at the example set by number 10 and going, well, why the fuck should I? You know what I mean? And I don't agree with it in any way, shape or form. And I don't think Ferrier's constituents are particularly happy for what I've seen either, and rightfully so. You want somebody representing you that is working with the best of intentions and know what looks like, their own benefit, especially at a time when we're just announcing a £3,500 pay rise for MPs. It looks like gravy train central for somebody who has definitely made an absolute cunt of it, you know what I mean?
Was there any justification given at all, so far?
Again, I didn't click on the Sun link, but I've seen people sharing quotes and stuff like that. The one that I've seen, so I'm assuming must have been for the article, was that COVID had impaired their judgment, which is a really famous symptom, like COVID, because I've known 3 people who had COVID, and every single one of them instantly went and got questionable tattoos. You know what I mean? So their judgment was seriously impaired. And I'm assuming this must be what the case is here. You know what I mean? It's ridiculous. Should they just see you're going to come out with a bullshit answer like, "Oh, my judgment was impaired by COVID." Just come out and be like, "Fuck you!" I'm just not doing it. You can't make me, and I'm not going to do it. See you at the next election where I will lose my seat, but I'll hold it to then. Bye. You know what I mean? Because
I don't care.
That's the message we all get anyway. You know what I mean?
That's the underlying one, isn't it? No matter what the excuse is that people just get the feeling that you just don't give a fuck. You just genuinely just and what? That's what the Dominic Cummings thing. I mean,
he just came out and went, and what?
We sat in the podcast absolutely tearing shreds out of the response at the Tory party. I'm glad to hear that Nicola Sturgeon, the First Minister, and the SNP or representative and the spokesman in Westminster have come out and condemned it, because I just was, again, that was just another one where I was like, I don't have the time for that now. I'm not getting involved in that.
Think of how many stops a train, even a couple of dozen stops between wherever, Glasgow and London, 2 ways, people getting on and off that train. I mean, the damage that could potentially have done if she handles a button on the way into a train, or a door handle, or a toilet handle. You know what I mean?
This brings us back
potentially up and down the country.
That brings us back sort of full circle to what we were talking about when we first came in, with people's disregard for the rules or the recommendations and stuff. Is that Can you imagine if you had taken every single step that's been given right for the word go, when the WHO had come in and told us to start wearing masks and wash our hands for 20 seconds and what you'd done everything, and you took your 70-year-old mother and your 10-year-old kid on that fucking train and seen her in that carriage? I mean, you would be rightfully fucking foaming with rage that she's just get no regard for anybody else other than herself, clearly, and just thought, fuck it, I'm just going to do what I want. I mean, I just don't understand what would go through her mind to think that she would get away with that. Or maybe there's no consequences to their actions ever, so they just don't really.
So this is it. I think it's the entitlement that comes along with privileged positions, is that some folk inevitably think that they're bulletproof. But there has been a cultural change. Political scandals are no new. They go back to, Parfumo and beyond. It's no a new invention that somebody in politics makes a mess of something. But what is new is that there seems to be a level of cover if you're bold enough to just ride out and go, no. You know what I mean? Now we've got 2 examples in whatever, let's say the last sort of 45 months, where really high-profile public figures have broken the rules and then just went, as you say, and what? You know what I mean? So it'll be interesting to see to what extent that sort of proliferates, because it's one of the ones where there's not going to be people out there bold enough to to just make mistakes now and go, do you know what you got to do about it?
Absolutely. Hey, well, mate, we'll end it there. Another week, another fucking soap opera in the world, but anyway, we'll see what the next couple of weeks has to hold, and like we're saying, we've got a couple of decent guests coming up, so looking forward to the next couple of episodes as well.
Absolutely, mate. I'll speak to you again soon.
No worries, dude.
Now.
You know you show the fear inside, it grows below the upper line. Oh. You know you try to hold you tightly by my side when all is crashing down. You'll never reach the surface, you live underground. Sky fire comes around when the steel ring falls to the ground. There is panic on the streets, a blackened sea full of shuffling feet. Sky fire, can't you see? You can try but you won't break me. It all alive is burning bright, and I won't back out. It's day to day, night to night. We have no choice who gets to roll the dice. You'll never reach the surface, you live underground. Sky fire comes around when the steel ring falls to the ground. There is panic on the streets, a blackened sea full of shuffling feet. Sky fire, can't you see? You can try but you won't break me. Sky fire comes around when the steel ring falls to the ground. There is panic on the streets, a blackened sea full of shuffling feet. Sky fire, can't you see? You can try but you won't break me.